Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hey, Pete. Welcome back. Films and Stuff podcast. How are you today?
I am great, Ethan. How are you?
I'm also great. It is time for our weekly stream or skip episode. Sometimes you say the rules, sometimes I say the rules, but we can jointly agree the rules are you give me a show to watch, I rate it. I give you a show to watch, you rate it. We come here and we discuss and tell our listeners whether they should stream it or whether they should skip it.
That's exactly right. And the whole point is that these are shows that neither of us would normally watch, or maybe we've not seen. And the idea is that it allows us to give our viewers a better idea of what the platform's overall status is.
So, without further ado, what was your assignment this week?
This week, I had History of the World Part 2.
Oh, you loved part 1, right?
So I haven't watched it in decades. That was the movie.
How many decades?
Well, it came out in 81.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I had no idea.
We're talking 40 years ago. That was a different time, as we all know. So I don't know how well that humor has stood up. I haven't seen it. And again, it's one of those movies that I kind of don't want to watch, only because I'm worried that
it'll ruin it.
It'll either ruin it or it'll change the way I feel about it. And the way I generally feel about it was a very funny movie.
Yeah.
And that, I want to keep it that way.
So what'd you think of part 2?
So part 2, I have not very complicated feelings. It's quite easy. Mel Brooks comes back, but not as an actor. He comes back as the narrator for the TV series because, of course, he's also in his 90s, so that's understandable. Yeah. And you've got a pretty stellar cast. So the main cast, or not, I say main, but the reality is that you've got a few stars who are always in it. So you've got J.B. Smoove, Wanda Sykes, you've got Nick Kroll, a bunch of these characters, they play different characters. And the idea is that the show is essentially a series of sketches depicting real life historical events and eras, but made into a satire or a parody, and also in such a way to kind of modernize it in a way so that it's more relatable.
Okay.
For example, Danny DeVito is a guest on one of the episodes, and he plays Tsar Nicholas, whose family is in exile.
Okay.
And you see Rasputin, and you see that his daughter is doing Instagram, quote unquote, influencer videos, which obviously didn't exist back then, but that's something that's relatable now, right? So that's how she's sustaining herself in these difficult times, is that she's become an influencer.
Okay.
In the second episode, for example, you see the depiction of Judas and Jesus' Last Supper. It's a parody of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Judas talking to some of the other disciples and how they're kind of like fed up with Jesus and so forth. I want you to think of this show as a mix of Saturday Night Live and Monty Python. So it's a bunch of unrelated sketches, but sometimes they're repeating characters, sometimes they're repeating of events. And it's like an anthology series that way, in the sense that the thread that connects through all the episodes is that it's a depiction of history, or a satirical or a parody view of history. But there's no rhyme or reason to what they've selected. On that basis, it's very hard to say, is this definitely a must watch? Is this not us? Is this a skip? It's very tough because, like Saturday Night Live, like some Monty Python sketches, some things are hilarious, some things less so.
Yeah.
So like the Danny DeVito sketch with Tsar Nicholas didn't land so well for me, but the Judas sketch with J.B. Smoove and Nick Kroll, that I thought was hilarious.
Do you think it has something to do with our familiarity with that piece of history? Like the Bible story may be more familiar than the Tsar Nicholas story, for example.
No, it may be, it may not be, but at the end of the day, like, I think funny is funny, regardless of the familiarity of it. And that's not to say I'm completely oblivious to what happened to with Tsar Nicholas.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're going to do something in like the Nazi era Germany time.
Cold War. Yeah.
I'm sure they will have. All I'm saying is that the humor will hit differently for different people. And if you have an affinity, you may find it funny. If you don't have an affinity, you may not find it funny. So I think that the best way to rate this is as a mooch, which is to say, hey, look, like other anthology series, like other sketch shows, like other comedy shows like this, it really comes down to your own personal sensibilities as to what is funny to you and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that something like this, I would certainly watch, and I'm sure I'll finish the series one day, but it's not a high priority show for me to sit down and watch at the moment, only because I think there are other shows that, you and I are watching right now that we would prioritize.
Okay. Doesn't sound terrible, but it sounds like there's some redeeming qualities, but I think
certainly. And yeah, again, it's very much a case of you should try it to see if it lands for you. If you love it, you're going to love it. If you don't be too shocked because of the nature of the kind of show it is.
Okay. So that is History of the World Part 2 or Volume 2?
Part 2.
And where is it streaming?
It's streaming on Hulu. I think there's going to be 10 episodes, maybe 8, but yeah.
Well, sticking with the Hulu theme, I also had an assignment from Hulu, and mine is an original comedy series, 13 episodes named Maggie, Maggie. It is a comedy, 2022, so it's pretty recent, starring people that I feel like I know, but I don't really know. So Rebecca Rittenhouse is the title character, Maggie. There's David Del Rio, Nicole Sakura, this one dude's wife, Chloe Bridges, Adam Devine, Chris Elliott, Blast from the Past. There are some people that I've recognized here. Let me summarize what is this comedy about. Maggie is a psychic. So this is set in Pasadena, California, which is nice to have something not in Los Angeles or New York. Set in Pasadena. She is a psychic, not really like a professional psychic, but kind of like I graduated from college and I don't have a job and I make a little bit of money giving psychic readings. And she's psychic, but not really like widely acknowledged as a psychic, but she is. So when she touches someone or holds their hand, she can kind of see images from their future. So some people come to her trying to find a lost pet. Am I ever going to meet a husband? Should I stay with this girl? And she gives them a reading. It's not clear what she charges. So then she meets this dude at a party, Ben. He's obviously trying to flirt with her, and she's kind of like, nah, not really feeling it today. She gives him a psychic reading, and it turns out they have a relationship together in the future and are quite happy. So Maggie is really freaked out. She's never seen herself, in the future. And she's worried on how to deal with these things. She's worried about the context, right? Like, she doesn't know how far in the future this is. But she kind of starts to see the guy. And that's the basis for this comedy, which is she's a psychic and she kind of has a relationship with someone and she can see his future. I watched 3 episodes and I can say the following. It is very funny and clever. Very similar to the review that I gave about Our Flag Means Death. Yeah. It is very clever writing and subtle jokes. And I can sincerely say that if I had to pen a comedy or write a script, it would be definitely my type of humor. And I say that because I'm trying to compliment the show. I'm saying this is what I would do if I were them. I cannot do better myself. But it falls a little bit flat in the sense that there's a lot of very fluff kind of tropian characters in between all the wittiness. So for example, if you remember way back, kind of the Seinfeld had Kramer, which was kind of like the crazy neighbor. And that was maybe all the way back from like Family Matters with like Steve Urkel, or even Family Ties with that one dude. There's always kind of like the crazy neighbor or kid's friend or someone, right? Who just does silly, crazy things for no good reason. And either they nail it like Kramer did, or Steve Urkel did. I can't remember that dude's name. Or they kind of fall flat.
Jaleel White.
Yes, thank you. Here, characters kind of fall flat. The quirkiness, maybe it will come. I'm sure Kramer was in funny episode 1. Maybe it will come, but it's not there yet. And that is a little bit like grown worthy, you know? So it just doesn't come off. And there's not a whole lot of like warmth between the characters. You know, it doesn't really feel like when you watch Seinfeld, for example, or some of the other like Friends, for example, you felt really relationships between the people, right? And here, everything just feels kind of like smashed together. Mothers and daughters and husbands and friends. No one really, you don't get like any sense of warmth, like whether that's a writing issue or an acting issue or a set issue. I just don't feel like any of the relationships here. None of them seem meaningful at all. And the premise is kind of okay. I have to say, it's not a bad premise. It is a comedy at the end of the day. But the wittiness, I like. You know, when there's banter between Ben and Maggie, their banter is funny and it's witty. You know, the situations are kind of clever, but definitely I'm not interested in watching more than 3 episodes. But if someone turned it on, I wouldn't turn it off or change it, if that makes sense. You know, like if I opened my laptop one day and it started playing, I would probably watch it a little bit to see what happened next. Is something funny going to happen? I wouldn't stop it right away. But I do like some of the things about it. And I think for a comedy on Hulu, it's a pretty good effort. I don't know if there's a better comedy on Hulu right now. It is an original. Possibly if this was going to, I have no idea if it's going to extend beyond season 1, which is only 13 episodes, as I mentioned. If it would extend to season 2, maybe the players have gotten their legs around them a little bit, or the script is tightened a little bit. But I have to say, I don't dislike it, but it's a solid mooch for me. I don't think you should skip it. I also don't think you should pay money for it. So that's my rating of Maggie on Hulu.
Just a quick question. So you said that you didn't feel like the relationships were genuine, or they didn't feel authentic?
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. I just didn't feel it, you know? Like, I don't feel any relationship between, like, there's like a mother and father, you know? And they're in a lot of the episodes.
Right.
I don't feel that they act like a married couple. Like, I don't feel anything between them. And I don't feel that they act like her parents. I just don't feel anything, you know? Like, they're both kind of quirky. Like, her mom has some type of like online shopping habit, and her dad has like also some type of habit. Like, they've got their quirks, but neither of those quirks were at all funny to me. It's almost like quirky trope, quirky trope, quirky trope. Okay, the banter back and forth is a little bit funny, but I feel like there's almost too many, like a comedian on stage with like all the props. Gallagher used to like smash watermelons, or Carrot Top used to do his things. I felt like there's just a lot of props here in terms of everyone's got their quirk. And that was trying to take the place of either a genuine relationship or, you know, more funny writing. But when they do kind of write dialogue, it was solid.
And do you think that would get better over time, or do you think that there's no hope? You know, like, for example, you mentioned Friends.
Yeah.
If you compare Friends of season 1 to Friends of like season 6, season 10, those relationships, I think, also took a few years to develop, right?
Super true. So I guess I would say back in the day, I think there was a little bit more runway for shows to find their legs.
True.
Like, if you watch the first few episodes of Seinfeld, man, it's borderline miserable. You would never be like, this will end 10 years later as the best show ever. It's not. compelling. Shows today, though, on Hulu don't get more than 13 episodes to like show me something.
You're right.
Like there's no, well, maybe you guys will figure it out in season 3. Like it's, hey, you better figure it out in the first 6 episodes because we've got to make a renewal decision by then. Fair, unfair, hate the game, not the player. But for me, I'm not really around to stick it out and give them another 2 seasons of my time if they haven't figured it out after a couple episodes, you know? That's unfair, but that's also life, you know? I just don't have the disposable time to keep watching stuff that's not compelling. I've got other stuff to watch.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah.
And you and I will talk about this on other episodes. There's other things that we're watching that we love, and we love them after 1 episode, 2 episodes, right?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, why would we not watch that and stick to watching something where like, well, that was no good, but I'm going to power through. Like, there's no reason to do that to yourself, you know?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I think that's probably the fundamental downside of the streaming platforms.
Yeah.
What executives used to give 2 or 3 seasons for, or at least 22 episodes for, has now shrunk down to 1 season. And that season isn't even maybe 13, isn't even maybe 10 episodes. It's like the Ring of Fire. You either succeed or you don't. And those that succeed then have a great chance of becoming excellent shows, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, no one's stopping this show from, you know, starting off gangbusters episodes 1, 2, and 3. If you've got to reshoot some stuff, if you've got to recast some stuff, if you've got to like rethink it, I know there's budgets and I know there's timelines, but after 1 episode, I've messaged you and I'm like, Pete, I'm 100% in, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's what I'm going to be watching, right? I don't have time for a show that after 3 episodes, I'm like,
You're absolutely right.
But it's not miserable by any stretch of the imagination. I don't want to say that. There's really some redeeming qualities here. And that's what's disappointing is that someone should have said, hold on. Let's do that again. This is how we need to like improve this. You know, like we've got something here, but it's not really hitting the mark. Let's recast the mom. Let's rewrite this dialogue. Let's change something up, you know? It is what it is, my friend. It is what it is.
And that's fine. And that's the whole point of the Streamer Skip series, right? Is to figure out what are the ones that we think are worth and not.
Yep.
Speaking of which, so if Maggie is a mooch and History of the World Part 2 is a mooch, let's take a look at what we're watching for next week. You will be watching on Apple TV The Big Door Prize.
100% excited.
I am too. I saw the trailer. It's with the only one I recognized in the trailer was Chris Dowd.
Yep.
But I'm in.
Okay, so that's what I've got. Big Door Prize. What do you have?
I will be watching on Hulu again, The Great.
Oh, is it about Catherine the Great or a different Great?
It is about Catherine the Great. Good call. I did not know. I had to look it up, and you beat me to the punch.
Well,
it's a comedic take on Catherine the Great. And I mean, we talked about Tsar Nicholas earlier, but I think Catherine the Great and Tsar Nicholas as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Be a good comparison now that you've watched History of the World Part 2.
Yeah. This has got a great cast. This has got Elle Fanning.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got Nicholas Hoult.
Don't recognize the name.
He plays Beast in the X-Men movies.
Oh, yeah. So that's stream or skip. We had the double Hulu edition today. Next week, we've got Hulu and Apple TV Plus.
I'm hoping we get our first double must subscribe of the year.
Ooh, we have not had one yet this year.
Yeah, we've come close.
Close, but no cigar.
Just a quick update on our previous episode. Liaison on Apple TV officially finished this last week.
Do you still love it?
Overall, the series is still a must subscribe. The ending was not what I expected and was maybe slightly below expectations, but overall, still a must subscribe.
Okay. Well, that's big praise for Apple TV Plus. Apple TV Plus is bringing it strong in 2023.
Some of the stuff that they've got planned looks really good. And of course, you know, we saw Shrinking.
Wait for that billion. Are you watching Shrinking?
Yeah, so Shrinking ended last week.
Yeah.
And I finished it, and I thought that was excellent as well. And I gave that a must subscribe as well.
That's not on our streamer skip, though, right?
It's not. It wasn't.
Extra credit that we both watched.
Yes, exactly.
I really liked it. I'm not sure if I'm at a must subscribe, but I'm close enough that I would not bicker with you if you say it's a must subscribe. But if you said it's just a mooch, I'd be like, yeah, but it's better than that, you know? So I'm somewhere between those two. If you did spend money for it, you will not regret it. But you could live without it.
I would say you could live without it because the quality of other programs that we've been watching is quite stellar so far.
Yeah.
But having said that, on its own, which is how we judge these things, it is definitely a must subscribe for me.
Yeah. So that is Films and Stuff. Stream or skip. Tune in next week. We've got some very big things on the horizon. Let's see where we are with the Big Door Prize and The Great.
That's right. In any case, if you guys have any other TV shows that you'd like us to put on our stream or skip list, or if you disagree with any of our previous assessments, leave a comment below this video. Reach out to us on Twitter at F&S Podcast. Drop us a DM on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast, or send us an email, aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Pete.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.